Everyone. Welcome to the Black Podcast. We're so glad to have you here. So, the first thing I need you to do is go ahead and start sharing this video. Okay. So, before we even get started, I need everyone to make sure that they are sharing this video. We always have special guests on here, and I tell you that they're special because they all have a unique story. And it's been a blessing to of the connections that we have made and the knowledge that we have been blessed with throughout the Black Podcast. So please make sure that not only that you're sharing, but you're also supporting us in making sure that the information gets, put out to our community. As we mentioned before, a lot of us just keep the knowledge to ourselves, but that's not what it's about. It's about spreading the good news. But I am your host, one of your hosts, Dr. Sherelle Hobson. I'm a student athlete resilience coach, and I'm also an athletic program enthusiast. And so many of you know that I've been very passionate about athletics, in particular with our young Black males. And my doctorate is in sports administration and leadership, where I focused on African American males and the effects of athletics on their educational plans. And so, what does that mean? A lot of us have, my whole life being an athlete, I noticed that there was a cycle that always continued. I saw these young Black men from the time I ran with them in high school all the way throughout my college career. I just realized that there was a common challenge or concern that was in the Black community. And that was, where are these young Black men? I see them for a little while involved in athletics, and then I don't see them again until, years and years later. And they never was able to pursue their athletic career because of just not given the right skills or the right mentorship or anybody in their life that was an influence for them. So it just really became something that was passionate for me. So as I transitioned from being an athlete to a coach, I knew that I wanted to make that type of impact in our community on teaching these life skills to these young Black males. Now, some say, well, why don't you focus on the girls? Well, we know that our girls also need that same attention, but it just like right now, it's so important that we focus on these men, these young boys, because as you know, they're struggling, their challenges to their life, just with society and in the educational system. So that's what I do, and I love what I do, is being very productive in the Black community. So please make sure that you also check out my bio on SherelleHobson.com, and you will find out more about what we're doing. But here on the Black Podcast is just a small portion or component of the big picture. So we have a company called HSBA, and that's what we focus on, mentorship and leadership program. And we make those relevant connections with these guests that you see on here now. They can actually connect with the young men and women who are going to be in our program. So I've been honored to partner up with my partner, Mr. Brian Street.
Yes, I think the honor's been mine. I look back to when we first connected, and I was telling this story on one of my training sessions not too many days ago. Is so many of us, when we get into the entrepreneurial space, we're solopreneurs, and we're thinking that we can go out and do it all by ourselves. We can make the impact that we desire to make all by ourselves. But we have to realize, okay, what is the DNA of my brand? What is it that runs through my veins when it comes to what I'm passionate about? And how can I find someone who has a similar DNA? And I was thankful that I was able to find you in that specific regard. But just taking it back a little bit, 2018, I started my company, Your Legacy Begins Now. And it was a few years after I moved back to Mississippi from Miami, whereas I was working in the child welfare field down there. And I saw these teenagers transitioning out to adulthood and not having, as you just mentioned, the life skills that are necessary to make a successful transition. And the system was not putting anything in place to help that matter. So I came back and I started my company so that I could run multiple different partnerships to generate revenue to go towards the development and sustainability of mentoring programs and leadership programs, partnering up with universities across the nation. I've already had a couple partnerships here in Mississippi, but right now I'm really narrowing in on the importance of practicing group economics, specifically in our community, to where we can keep that dollar in our community a whole lot longer. Because the thing is, a lot of us are getting out here, we're making the money, but where is it going? Who is it going back to? We have to keep it in our community because that's how we start to regain power. Now, with that being said, this gentleman that we're about to introduce to you, he's gotten a taste of some big money, and he's been definitely doing some positive things with that money, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. We have the one and only Don Carey III. How's it going, brother?
Oh, I'm blessed to be here, man. Thank you so much for the invite. How y'all doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing good. So we're just so glad that you accepted the invite. Just watching what you're doing, we only get to see that overall result. Like, oh wow, he's doing big things. He's doing this, he's doing that. His life looks amazing. Looks like everything is just worked out just perfect for you. And so we just wanted to reach out because we know that behind every glory there's a story. And as we talked before, sometimes we feel that our story is not relevant, or sometimes we feel like, well, everybody goes through it. We hear people say that all the time. Everybody goes through something, but we don't all respond in the same manner. So to see where you're at right now, we were just so interested in knowing where it all started. So if you can just get started with just where you're from and like the dynamics of your family. Let's start when you were very young.
Sure. So I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The two teenage high school students. By the time I was 3 years old, my mom and dad, there were four of us in the house. And my dad was now gone, leaving my mother to raise four kids on her own. So for the longest time, the only positive role models that I would see would come either from my next door neighbor when I saw the way he interacted with his kids, or if I got a chance to hang out with my uncle who lived on the other side of town. So fast forward to about my freshman year in high school, my mom meets this retired Navy veteran named William Robinson. And I meet Rob in July. He comes to one of our football games. I played football at the time. And by December 13th, we're packing up a Penske truck, and he's moving us down from Grand Rapids, Michigan to Norfolk, Virginia, where they actually still live in that same house. So December 13th, 2000, they moved us down to Norfolk, Virginia, in a house that they still live. He and my mom gets married, and our family quickly blooms from the four of us to a mom, a military dad, and 7 kids. So nicely blended household for sure. I go to Booker T. Washington High School, and the first time I stepped on a college campus was an HBCU called Norfolk State University. I eventually end up going there, and I'm kind of breezing through these. You can go back in detail if y'all want. I go to Norfolk State University on an athletic scholarship. I played 4 years and become the first first player drafted into the NFL in the D1 era. So the first player since 1996. The only player to be drafted and play 10 years from that school. So that's a lot. Let's stop there. We could parse there, I guess, and then
yeah. So, and thank you for sharing that with us. So when you talked about like when you were young and growing up, like a lot of times when men are having to become now, the father. So I'm sure at 4 you probably wasn't, but it was still like a lot of responsibilities probably change.
Yeah.
From the time that you realize like my mom is doing this by herself and you transition into that high school, like your freshman year, getting to sports, what was that? How were you introduced to sports? Because a lot of times what I've noticed when I was coaching was that a lot of challenges that our young men had was that they couldn't be as involved in sports because they had to help out. Mom has to go to work, so mom is not able to get you to practice and get you here and get you there and do this and do that. So if you can just elaborate on when, I guess, sports or football or whatever it was introduced to you, and how was it something that was an easy transition for you? Was there a reason why you joined it? Was it just like, what was that for you, that experience?
Yeah, so my first introduction to football was my older cousins. Right, so they're 2-3 years older than me, and some are a little older than that. And like I said, for the first 10, 12 years of my life, I was the only boy in the house. I had 3 sisters. My mom, heck, even the dog was a girl. So if I wanted to hang out with my older cousins, they would let me be the all-time snapper. You know what I mean? They'd give me some cool NFL name, somebody I didn't know who it was, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be down. So I realized, hey, if I want to do more than just snap the football, I got to start getting good at football. So my uncle takes me in and enrolls me into tackle football a year earlier than what I should because he was the head coach. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It was difficult to really be super involved in football my first couple of years. But it wasn't until my sisters got a little older and they can kind of look after themselves enough. My mom worked down the street, so she can go to work. She will leave us at the house, and we can look after ourselves. If something happened, she was a quick walk to us. But when that time came, I was then able to walk to practice. Now, when I say walk to practice, I will walk 3 miles to practice, and then walk 3 miles back every single day. When I get so in Michigan, they had like 70-years league. So when I get to middle school, that walk then became a 7-mile walk that I rode a bike. So I rode a bike to practice, then rode my bike back. And the reason I did that is football presented something that I had not figured out how to rightly do since losing my father. The pain, the hole that was left from my father not being there, I didn't have an outlet. I didn't know how to, get all that negative energy that built up steam off, except when I was hitting somebody on the football. But it was my outlet. So I learned. I mean, I didn't articulate this at a young age, but now looking back, I learned that the identity that I needed from my father, I got through football. I learned that the intangibles in life, hard work, accountability, responsibility, I learned through football. Just a love for life and be able to step away from the situation that was at home. I got those things through football. So I would do everything I could to get to that football field. So if it was 3 miles, I'm walking 3 miles with my equipment in hand. If I got to ride my bike, I'm riding my bike. I don't care how long it took. And man, I'm so glad that I had that mindset, because prior to really getting involved in football, I was a depressed kid. I mean, I would write like poems and letters about, what was wrong with me, that my daddy didn't love me. I would contemplate, is it even worth being alive? I mean, everything that was wrong in my life, I was blaming on my father in that time. So being able to escape right to this fantasy world of football where, I'm not just this poor kid, who doesn't have a father. I can really establish my own identity of who I want to be on this football field. And then that was so liberating to me during that time.
Wow.
Yeah. Just relating in the sense of football being a release. I have an article that's going to be published at the end of the month, and in a part of the article, it asked something around your resilience when you were coming up, or something about your past. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that I went to, because I was you can't tell it now, but I had natural curly hair, so I was Jerry Curl. And I'm telling you, I used to get teased like crazy. I remember this one time I had my pick in my hair, and this one dude just grabbed me, slammed me up against a locker, took my pick, and said, "Charge to the game." I didn't even know what that meant, but that was right before I started playing football, and all of that pent up frustration, just like hating the fact of being who I was at the time. But as I got older, I started saying, okay, so girls actually like this type of hair. So I started to get into it, but being where I was at the time, that had to be my release as well. And I think it's so important that you mentioned that, because you look at the times that we're in right now, where so many people are all cooped up. Being able to get out, even if you're in a small group, just being able to get out and get a little physical, that can really unleash some of that, those emotions that you have inside.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's a mistake to try to have boys release, built up tension, and by making them more calm and docile. It's something about a man that you need that within yourself. So I don't think it should be make more calm, make you more docile. Whereas I think it should be teaching you how to rightly and properly release whatever stress that's going on in your life. Because if you don't teach a child how to release whatever they're going through, they're gonna grow up and then they're gonna release it in radical ways. All right.
Yeah.
So the worst thing for a young black man is to be introduced into the juvenile or the prison system. So football gave me a positive way to release the built up tension that I had without making me docile. I still was able to keep my confidence, still able to keep the audacity that I have, and it's really it's boded very well for me in my life.
Wow. So one thing that, so my study was on African American males and the effects of athletics on their educational plans.
Sure.
And I really focused on our young men. So I had an opportunity to go around and interview a lot of different coaches from basketball to football to baseball. And I remember just kind of going back when I was a head coach for track and field, I knew that there were certain things that I wanted these young girls to know about. And it wasn't just about track. So I used to spend so much time like explaining to board members and assistant principals and all these people on why I have these conversations. You know, my girls would come and study hall and I would have the word on the board, life or choices or whatever. And so, at the time the girls just go, oh God, here go coach with her, preaching. I'm yes. So, and you're going to listen. And so, but at the time I had a principal, his name was Sam Hogue, and he was white, but he was just very supportive. He knew what my intentions were. And so I told him, I said, if I can coach them through life, I can coach them to anything. And so we used to always win, championships back to back to back, because I built relationships with my girls. I knew what they needed, what kind of life they had, what they were lacking. And so when I was able to do my study, I was so interested on what these folks, what are these coaches thinking about when they're coaching these young men, because sometimes being vulnerable and all those kind of things come off as being soft, or coaches always feel like they don't have time, and so it was just interesting because a lot of our young men, especially in particular Black and brown young men, they're in sports for a reason, whether it's to release frustration, whether it's to get out of a certain situation, whether it's, that big dream of I need to help my family, I want my family to make it. And some of them just want to be a part of something. And so, which is interesting to hear the different coaches talk about, how you can't just come out there and coach. You will lose every single young men out there because they all don't have, they have stuff. I remember one coach was telling me how one guy used to come to practice, 30, 40 minutes late every day. And so one time the coach took him into the office and said, man, if you're going to be late like that, you can't be on this team. And he said, man, coach, when the bell rings, I got to run across the street, pick my sister up, then run across the other street, pick my other sister up. Then I got to take them home, make sure they start on their homework, make them a quick sandwich because my mom's still at work. Then I run back across to get here, as fast as I can for practice. And so when they started understanding that these kids is, they got a whole nother life that they have to do outside of football, there was more understanding, and they helped them to understand their story. So how was it your coaches in high school? What was that type of influence? Do you feel like it was a positive experience for you, or did you feel like there were some things that were lacking that you had to learn later on when you went before you got to college?
So interesting, you mentioned a story about the football player coming late. So when I used to walk 3 miles to practice, I would be late. And my coach would always ask, hey, why are you always late? And I told him the reason I was late. By the time I got off the bus, get my sister straight and walk, to practice, as soon as I could get here. And he thought I was lying. He actually gave me a ride home one day. Yeah, and he looked at the odometer. By the time he got home, it was like 3.2 miles. And showing up, he was amazed. And he took a different tack with me from there on, right? Understanding that, hey, man, Carey's going to be a little late. But also, I think he had like a greater appreciation for my determination and my commitment to the game. I'm blessed. I'm not going to lie to you. When I got to high school, even before I got to high school, when my mom married a retired military veteran, my life changed. Let me tell you that. The first thing my dad did because he took my dresser away. He took my dresser away and he made me fold my clothes, my shirts, pants, my drawers, socks a certain way. He made me make my bed a certain way because he saw a young man who with a lot of potential, but who had no discipline or not enough discipline to see my goals be actualized. Secondly, he made me write down my goals. What do you want to do in the next 3, 5, 10 years? And then he really just raised the standard. So for me, when I first got to high school, my goal was I want to make it to the NFL. That was gonna be my 10-year goal. 10 years I want to be in the NFL. He said, how you get there? So you got to go to college. Because at that time they had just instituted you have to be a college attendee, right? And then later on they would say now you got to be in college for 3 years, right? So I'm like, I just got to go to college. It's crazy because nobody in my family had ever been to college. So I'm talking mom, dad, uncles, aunties, so on and so on. And then he said, okay, so how do you get to college? I'm like, I got to graduate high school. So graduate high school, which in my family, if you graduate high school without having a kid, you're doing something big. But then to go to college, which had not been done, then to make it to the NFL, which only had been done by a distant cousin named O.J. McDuffie. He played for the Miami Dolphins, a tight end, like years and years and years ago. So it was like, okay. Here we go. My stepdad then said, okay, it's not good enough to graduate high school. You got to graduate high school with honors. It's not good enough to make it to college. I want you to get a full ride. It's not good enough to make it to the NFL. We're going to get drafted. Right. So I had this military man with a military mindset at home. And then it didn't help when I got to the football field. I had a set of coaches who cared far more about me as a man than they did a football player. So, and I love my coaches. I talk to them to this day. I still keep in contact with my high school and my college coaches. So I've been blessed that pretty much every step of the way, I've had real men who care about other men or training other men and took the time to have those conversations about life. I really can't think of a coach that I've had who just wanted to go X's and O's, with us. So yeah, that's the grace of God. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You to be a good coach, because oftentimes you're not just coaching X's and O's, because there's very few people who, when they step on a field, the playing field or the court, can cut off that light switch of life and just lock right in. I mean, you kind of bring that stuff with you. So if you're going to be a coach to bring out the best of who an individual is, you got to help them navigate what they're dealing with off the field, so that they can give you the best they have on the field. Yeah, and the best coaches really understand that.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I look at some of these shows. I mentioned this on a previous show. You got Last Chance U. You got some of these, like really the basketball edition, like that speech that the coach gave them. I forget what scene it was or what game, what part of the season it was, but he was saying how, like, I'm missing my daughter's game to be here for y'all. I'm missing my son's game. I'm missing time with my wife to be here for y'all. And y'all don't care. And when you have someone that's a mentor more than just a coach, that's when you completely transition or transform what that individual's future can be. Because like you said, a lot of times, especially us in our community, most of us, too many of us, we don't have that example in the household our entire time, throughout, coming up, being raised. So being able to see that example outside of the household, it being a positive, a constructive example, is what's going to help us go in the right direction. Whereas if we don't get that, we're going to let those guys on the street corner. They got a nice whip, they got the nice chick. Like, I'm trying to get like him. And you start falling in those footsteps. And that's what takes us left field. So, it's great that you had that structure, and then having that military. I took JROTC for a year in high school, and it completely put me on a different trajectory. So I can imagine having that in the house 24/7.
Man, this guy would come every morning, because he went to work before he got up to go to school. So he'll come every morning, hit that light switch on, and he's checking. So I had like this dormer right where my window was. So it was like a little landing. I had to put on my stuff, and he's looking, make sure all my shirts are a certain way, or my pants a certain way. If it's not, we had an issue. And issues with my dad were worked out through me writing letters. I had to write an open letter to him explaining what the situation was, why I did what I did, what's the game plan moving forward, and how I'm not going to fall into the same trap of being a repeat offender of whatever I dealt with. So it was never. I'm sorry, it was never good enough.
So you're in a boot camp.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely a blessing. I mean, my father was in the military. He was in the army, and it's so funny because they are very structured but my father wasn't like your average military father. Like he was really kind of laid back, but when he meant business, that's what he meant, and if you did something, whatever you started, you better finish it. We had you're not a loser mentality in here. You're going to win, but we didn't have really that. Well, I guess as a girl, I did have a little, I remember my when I got my first car, and so I got outside and my dad was like, I don't know if one of the wheels was off or something. And he was just like, I wanted to go to the mall. And so he's just like, you can go to the mall after you put that, tire back on. Like, and I was just like, this dude is tripping, right? Like all my other girlfriends just get in their car. They don't have to worry about tires and stuff. But it's, when I look back at all the things that I learned, how to put a spare tire on, what to do if I have a flat on the side of the road. When I bought my first house, it was like, here's your housewarming gift, a lawnmower and a weed eater. I'm like, people usually get dishes and but it was just him always installing in me, like, you want to be able to do these things on your own, if, in case you're on your own. So they are very, structured and disciplined when it comes to certain things. Now, so because you were the only one in your family that was going to college and, having all these, what was that? Was there any pressure? Do you feel like, okay, I got to make it now. Like everybody's depending on me. Like when you realized that you were really good in football and then you had a chance and you're about to go to college, and then that pressure of like, okay, now if I get there, it's not just getting there, but making sure I do something with it. So what was that pressure like? Or was there pressure for you? Where the support come from, and just tell us about that experience when you knew like, okay, now I'm on my way getting a scholarship. What did that feel like as far as the pressure in your life?
So it was interesting. There was a lot of pressure, but that wasn't the pressure I was dealing with. What you described, the pressure I dealt with really came in two forms. The first was I had this nearly paralyzing fear of ending up the way my biological father went. Right, so here you are, is a man who was extremely talented. I mean, when he was in his right mind, sober minded, he's one of the best guys you can hang around. But when drugs enter into the equation, we're talking about a completely different human being. So when I mentioned at the age of 3, how my mother was left to raise me and my sister on her own, that's because my dad was ripped away because of drugs. So I had a lot of pressure that I put on myself not to end up like my dad. So I got to be successful. I don't want to end up, putting my kids or putting myself in the same situation that my dad had put us in himself in. The second was, man, for the longest time, I really struggled with the idea of belonging or realizing that I deserved to be as successful as I was being. So I developed this idea or this mindset of productive paranoia, right? So if I wasn't being productive, then I was fearing that somebody was gonna come take my spot, because really you don't belong to be here, so you better be productive while you are here so you can stay here. type stuff.
Yeah.
So those were really the two things that I went into college with, and I'll tell you the second part where it really comes from. I made my own highlight tape in high school. It was on. I was on a VHS, right? VHS tape that I had dubbed everything myself, and a lot of it was footage that came from my stepdad, because he went to every game and recorded every game. And then we sent those tapes out to as many colleges as we could. and we just watched the rejection letters come in. Oh, it was disheartening to say the least. And I remember I sent one to Norfolk State University. Now, at the time, Norfolk State University was one of the worst performing football programs in the country. If they won 2 games, they did pretty good that year. And the response I got back from that head coach was, hey, you got some talent, but you're too small. You don't have what it takes to play on a D1 level. And I mean, to his credit, I was like 140 pounds, graduated from high school. So I wasn't the biggest guy in the world. Say that. But I'm thinking, man, if I can't play at Norfolk State, like where else can I play? That head coach gets fired, and they bring on this new head coach from Bethune-Cookman down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And he gives me a phone call and says, hey, you remind me of this guy I once coached who went on to the NFL named Rasheem Mathis. Rasheem went on to play 13 or 14 years in the NFL. And he wanted to give me a scholarship. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him. So he had to literally come and bring the scholarship to me before I believed it. So wow. I signed and I walk on to. Well, I didn't walk on. I end up at Norfolk State University, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, you really may not belong here, so you better not mess it up.
You don't want to change your mind.
Yeah, right. I'm like, man, we've never dealt with this scholarship thing, so can they just pull a scholarship? I don't know. But what I learned is, though the mindset was wrong to think that I didn't belong there, the fundamental attitude of productive paranoia was very, very good for me. Because when I got to the NFL, that productive paranoia was very real. If you're not productive on a professional level, people don't know that there are 2 scouts assigned to every player, right? There's a scout trying to replace you on the collegiate level and a scout trying to replace you on a professional level, the free agent market. So you better make sure whatever your job is that you do that thing very well, because somebody's always chasing your spot. So there was a lot of pressure going into college, but it just so happened that I'm an individual that I sometimes I don't realize how dire a situation is. So I have this disregard for what people say I can't do, this disregard for what seems to be impossible, this disregard for what seems to be a little more difficult than other people. And that helps out so that pressure doesn't really ever overtake me.
Man, I'm listening to that productive paranoia, and all I think about is you walking those 3 miles. You're going to do what it takes. Yep. Like just dating all the way back. And that's what so many people would think. I know just where I came up. So many of my classmates, my teammates, like they were very high skilled, but they thought that their talent alone was going to get them to the next level. Yeah. So they wouldn't work hard. They would do what they needed to do just to shine a little bit, but they wouldn't put forth that extra, and that's what kept them from making it to that next level. So I think that's a real powerful message that you mentioned, where so many aren't willing to do what's necessary, but they still want the prize. So just looking at your whole football career, looking at going from a youth all the way to getting to the NFL, and where you currently are in life. So what has your recent or most recent professional transition look like? I see you got some philanthropy work going. You got some movie work going. Like, talk to us. What's the current transition looking like?
All right. So since retiring from the NFL, my wife and I, we founded a nonprofit organization called the REECH Foundation, which focuses on reaching, educating, empowering children, connecting them to STEM careers right in their backyard. When I was in the NFL around 2014, I learned that by the year 2020, experts were saying there'll be 1 million jobs in the STEM sector with nobody to fill them, and that we were importing most of our STEM workers from Indonesia, Singapore, Asiatic countries like that, because they lead the world in STEM education. And I'm like, man, and then there was a huge underrepresentation of inner city kids, kids of color, Black kids, to be more specific, as well as our female representation. I'm like, okay, what can I do to connect people who look like me to successful, meaningful jobs? And we began doing that work in Detroit firstly. And then we continued that when I retired. Our foundation now touches around, pre-COVID, we would touch around 1,200 kids per year with different various events that we will host. With, again, connecting them to these meaningful jobs. It meant so much to me to do that. Secondly, I'm venturing into the movie deals. My first time as an executive producer of a documentary called Unspoken, which traces the Christian heritage of Africa, from Jerusalem through Africa, and what role did Christianity play in slavery and all those things, just answering questions that people have and really trying to set the right historical view of what was whitewashed, right, or what has just been lies told to individuals. And I know it's not a religious podcast, so I won't go too deep into that unless I want to.
Go as deep as you need to.
Yeah, all right. So I'll say this: every major Christian doctrine that we have was hashed out in Africa, not in Europe. The vast majority of things that we believe in terms of the deity of Jesus, the interaction of the Trinity, so the Holy Spirit, even the Reformation, were all founded by people who look like you and me. And that's not to say that it makes us better, but it does say that it's a grave injustice to deny that reality to people who look like us, who oftentimes are asking the question, well, if this view that we see of this white Jesus is real, then what place do I have in his faith? But the reality is that the God of the Bible has been intentionally involved in and cared for the lives of African descendant people, past, present, and future, and we hash all that out. We do. We just hash all that out. All right. So along with that, in 2020, I was also elected as a city council member in the city of Chesapeake. I was blessed to garnish more votes than any other council member in the history of the city, really in the entire state for a spring election, which is pretty phenomenal. So I've been working to make sure that I'm a politician who has compassion and conviction, right? And that's something that you either see individuals who are very compassionate about helping individuals, but they don't rightly, work out the consequences of what they're trying to do. But then on the other side, who their conviction is so strong of, we do these in conservative ways that you fail to see the humanity of people. And I'm like, well, I think it's a way to have both of those.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's important to have people who are not so partisan minded that they can't take a step back and see, okay, we're dealing with human beings first, right? And then policy has to coincide. So it shouldn't have, I don't think it has to be one or the other.
Yeah.
But the most important job I have is I get to raise my 3 kids with my beautiful bride. We have 2 boys and a girl, and we are trying to homeschool deal. And every day that I get to spend time with them, making breakfast, and I do most of the cooking now, is the greatest joy of my life.
So I'm just going to kind of, I know I'm always the person I got to go backwards, but doing all the things that, when you made that transition, I know that people typically try to put you in a box.
Yeah.
He's a football guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Who's going to listen to a football guy? He plays football. So, how obviously they bought into what you were saying, because, you won. So congratulations on that. But did you feel, like, when you made that transition, like, okay, are people going to take me serious? Because I know that's how I felt. A lot of times people put me in this box. Like, once you're an athlete, they keep you right there. Like, you can't be both, right? You can't be educated and an athlete, or a person of influence or whatever. Talk about that. And then if you can just share with us where did that desire come from when you were like, okay, I want to invest in education and all that stuff. Where did that drive or motivation come from? So both questions.
Okay, so I'll take the latter one if you don't mind first. So my drive to help individuals really comes from the home. So even though it's one thing I love about my mother, even though we didn't have a lot, You know, and even when she married my stepfather, we still didn't have a lot. When we had enough, they would still bring family members into the house, right? So if you are a cousin in Pittsburgh or a cousin in Michigan or a sibling in Michigan who needed help, they will let you come stay, you know, with us. Our already cramped house won't charge you rent as long as you are committed to doing what was necessary, excuse me, to be successful. So, and then my dad being a coach, well, I didn't mention that part. My stepdad was a coach as well. So he understood that I can't just give X's and O's. So we would do a lot of work in the community with the young people. So my passion to help people really was instilled by my mother and my father. And when I got to Detroit, if you've never been to, Detroit is an amazing place. It really is. So I got there in 2011, right in the heart of the housing crash, and I learned that the students in these schools really weren't being connected to the successful opportunities there. So I'm like, okay, what can I do to help? It really was just how can I help be that bridge between these young, bright-minded kids who deal with so many hardships, right? So, for an example, one of the schools we worked in, 40% of the parents could not read, let alone the students. But outside of that, the school dealt with 7 different gangs on a daily basis. And this is elementary school. All right, so I'm like, okay, man, if I can help, I should help. So that's really where that drive came from. I just want to see people who look like me be successful. I'm sorry. I don't want to say when somebody say they don't see color. I see color. I think it's beautiful. I think black is beautiful. And I want to do every single thing I can to do to help us. That don't mean I want to help everybody else.
Right.
But I do pay special attention. And that's fine, right? That's fine. And I think that's God honoring to do so. Right? I mean, in the Bible we all carry around, Paul says, look, I go to my people first. I don't have a problem with that, so I do the same. No, all right, but then on the other tip, people really didn't take me serious at first, and that's okay. They didn't take me serious at first, but what a lot of people could have realized about athletes, the decisions that we have to make in a split second on the court, on the field, comes from hours and hours and hours of studying playbooks and film. And you develop this mindset, this work ethic that is rarely ever duplicated outside of sports, save maybe the military. So when I approached politics, I brought the same mindset as a NFL player to that sphere. Whereas in the NFL, you begin preparing for a season in April, right? So everyone sees the product in September, but they don't see the 6 months of hard work leading up to that. So that same exact mindset I brought to politics. Okay, election day was in May, but I'm starting back in January to give myself the best opportunity to be successful. So that's learning the issues, that's learning the rule book, and then establishing my playbook off of the issues in the rule book. And that put us in a position that most people weren't in. And it also helped that when people Googled my name, they saw the work that I did in the community. So that's one thing I appreciate about the NFL. I was able to, shine my light from that platform, that people can see that I was serious about what I was doing.
Yeah. I love it, man. I absolutely love it.
Oh, wait a minute. There you go.
I remember about 4 or 5 years ago when I really started getting into the local media because of some of the youth-related work that I was doing. There was this doctor. There was this one doctor that my wife at the time worked for, and he would always tell me, "You need to become a politician. I'll make sure you win." So he got money, he got influence in town, but he would always say that I have that drive, but also I have the logic to make sure I make the right decisions, and that's something that I see in you. And when it comes to sports, especially, I mean, just thinking about being a safety in and of itself, you can't get beat deep. Like, you're like the last resort. So like, you have to have your stuff together, or like everything can crumble. So I think it's that was a nice strategic move for you, and the fact that you already had the name, you already had a reputation for yourself. That's going to make people actually have their eyes on you. but at the same time, it's going to help you wanting to make sure you uphold your integrity, because it's not only politics, there's other things that are riding on your name and other people you affiliate yourself with.
Yes.
So, speak a little bit more about let's see what time we got. Speak a little bit more about what you're doing with Reach, because, obviously that's in alignment with what we're doing, myself and Sherelle here. Speak a little bit more to us about what you have going on with that, because I think that's something we definitely need to make sure we push out, because it's preparing the next generation.
All right, so we really can couch what we do at Reach in three different arenas. The first one is STEM introduction: science, technology, engineering, art, and math, STEAM introduction. And we do that through our youth day and our STEAM day and youth football camp, in which we utilize football as a hook to bring 400 students into an arena where it's an interactive STEM fair, as well as a traditional football camp. So I say football as a hook because even though we have the kids for about 8 hours, they spend a total of 45 minutes doing actual football work. So when we have them there, they are immediately immersed around 25 to 30 STEM companies right in their area who are all looking to hire, who all understand that we're playing the long game here, because a lot of our students are in elementary and middle school. So all of these organizations are like, if we can plant the seeds in these kids now, when they're of workable age, then we're committed to bringing them on. All right, so that's one of our criteria. Two of our criteria is, number one, be willing to hire these kids or give internships to the ones who are old enough. And the second is, you got to be fun. Like, we want you to show why working for you is a good idea. The other thing we do is we always partner with some type of organization that we want to increase relationship with inner city youth. So for about 3 or 4 years, we've been partnering with either the police chief or the fire chief or the sheriff to assist us in running our football drills. Because I don't want the first time or the only time our youth interact with police is in something negative, right? Number one, I want police officers to see the human side of our youth. Not saying that they always don't, but heck, if anytime we can help get a little more of that humanity there, we want to do that. And secondly, we want to help our inner city youth see that, hey, I know what you see on TV, but in your area, this isn't the situation, right? Police officers are good people you can trust. So we're trying to cement those relationships in the best ways that we can. And then we get into some traditional football stuff. All right, so that's one vein. The second vein is we do what we call STEM in schools, where we actually bring those same companies into the schools of middle school and high school students, so that we're not just introducing it to them now. Now we're watering these seeds, trying to let them know even furthermore, this is what this company has for you. This is how much money they make. We take them to the campuses so they can see these things. And all that is done to, number one, inspire a kid to want to actually work in one of these places, and to let them know that, hey, even though we would love for you to go to college, success isn't directly tied to college, right? So there are vocational jobs, there are military jobs, and then there's the collegiate run as well. And here are some jobs in the area that's available to you in that. And then the last anchor is, we're trying to dispel the notion that you have to go to an Atlanta, to a New York, to a Houston to find success. You can find success right here in your own backyard, in hopes that when you actually take on those jobs, that you will then come back and create this generational wealth of people seeing people who look like them succeed where they are. So that's it. I mean, everything we do is kind of couched right in there. And we've seen some tremendous success. And once we're out of COVID, we're looking to do bigger and better things with our events.
Wow, that is awesome. I mean, it's a blessing, as you talk about your story. And when we look back, it all starts making sense. It all starts, you're like, oh, okay, I see why this happened or this happened. And it starts, developing you as a man. And one of the things that I really admire about you is just your resiliency, just how you continue to push. It was so funny. We talked about, people not taking you serious. What they don't know is, like, for an athlete, you just motivating me to just step it up. You know what I'm saying? Every time somebody say you can't do something, it's like, dang, I love, like, when they just say, I can't.
Thanks for the motivation.
Hey, please just continue to tell me that I can't. And so it's just a blessing when you look at the transitioning of athletics, because a lot of times people try to take that, make it look negative, like, oh, stop focusing so much on sports. It's like, well, if you're in a right situation, or even if you're not in the right situation as an athlete, as far as being a part of a program, if we can just develop their mindset and show them the way, being an athlete within that program, what their life can look like. And that's why, we developed the Black podcast, because, at the time of football, it was just about football, but football opened up other endeavors for you, help you build other relationships for you, introduce you to other places, traveling, all these different things that people always try to downplay when they talk about athletics and sports. And a lot of our athletes need to know that. And like you said, success doesn't look the same for everyone. People always say, um, when I've been in education for 16 years, and they have this thing of, the world is created equal and all these kids have all these opportunities. Yeah, we all have the opportunities, but it's not all presented the same. Right. And, sometimes the lack of involvement with the community is not because they don't care, it's because they don't know. And, we're dependent on, if they care, they'll come ask. Well, that's not always true, because you can't ask something that you don't know, um, so it's just important that we have people like you that have gone through that journey and can relate to these athletes, or relate to these young men. And even if they don't ever want to play football moving forward, when they come into your program, it's so much they can learn. Same way you learned about folding your clothes and your drawers and your socks, it's the same thing for them, that, hey, life is going to have some hits. Life is going to have some challenges. There's going to be some wins. There's going to be some losses, but this is how you can transition that into your life. And so I just really appreciate you doing that for our community, and just being a great example for your children. We don't give Black men or fathers enough credit, when it comes to being involved with their family. And so it's just a blessing to see you have that balance and living your life with purpose. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We have we got a guest out of Brazil that he just sent me a direct message. And he says, even though we have achieved success in our careers, we sometimes find ourselves facing ghosts and fears from the past. What's Don's advice on overcoming this?
Wow, that's like a deep philosophical question, right? For me, that's a good question. When I was a rookie in the NFL, and I had a lot of hate and anger towards my biological father, someone who worked with the Jacksonville Jaguars just asked this very simple question to me. He said, Don, had you not been through what you went through in your youth, would you be the man that you are today? And I mean, I couldn't. Now, I'm typically a pretty witty guy. If I used to always have like a little smart comment to come back. I couldn't say anything to the man. I actually just walked away. So, and what I learned from that is, though I would never go back and relive it, I now see that had I not gone through it, I wouldn't be who I am today. So I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But because I was able to go through that and keep breathing every single day, I'm the man that I am today. So whatever those ghosts or whatever those remnants are that come back up in my past, I just remind myself that, okay, I overcame that, and I do look like my past. I'm sorry. People say I don't look like my past. I don't run from my past. My past molded me to the diamond that I am today. So I embrace all that. And then I am open and transparent when I talk to somebody else who may be in my situation. So number one, be motivated that, hey, it's not your fault. Number two, keep breathing, because on the other end of this is going to be an amazing human being that's going to touch somebody else's life.
Wow, that's a blessing. So what do you sell? So closing out, what do you say to the high school boy that's listening?
Sure.
what do you say? What would you say to that college boy that's listening? And what do you say to that man? Because a lot of times we're so focused on just the youth, but some of us are just finding our way in our adult life. So what are your three advices for those three men?
Sure. So to the high school person, so we started, you said high school, middle school, no, high school, college, and the grown man. I would say in high school, as best you can, begin to do the necessary things to be successful in life. And I got air quotes here because success is whatever you determine to be for yourself. I can't tell you what success is like for you. And there have been studies that show the cycle of success, regardless of who you are, but particularly for Black people. The cycle of success is to, number one, wait until you're married to have kids, get a job, keep a job, graduate high school, stay out of the criminal justice system. Black men who do those four things have a 96% success rate in being in the middle or upper middle class. And that's just bare minimum. I would then say individuals who take it a step further and taking an introspective look at what are you good at? What skill sets do you have? Then how do you take advantage of a capitalistic society of America to market those skills and maximize it to where individuals want to buy your product? That's how you go on from just being an average individual to a successful person in life, right? So I know that's kind of heady, but if you can figure that out in high school or in college, man, you are well along your way to being a very successful, very prominent individual, even if you are somebody who, though we all have the same opportunities, we all have different hurdles, we all have different roadblocks, and we all don't have the same starting line. Even if you're able to do those things I mentioned, those roadblocks, that starting line, those hurdles that you have are just going to be bumps in the road and you're going to find success. I would also say to all of these individuals, don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel, right? Again, I mentioned earlier, there's always somebody who you can look for or look to find success. There's always somebody, but you have to be careful because not every single person who is doing what you want to do should be a role model to you. And I gotta get this example if I could, please. When I first walked into the Jacksonville Jaguar locker room, I saw one of my idols as a football player. He would soon be a Hall of Fame receiver. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, can you coach me up? How do I be successful? How do I do well like you have in the NFL?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I coach you. I coach you right to the bench. This is a competition. I ain't trying to help nobody, right?" He was great at his craft, but that's not somebody I need to model my life after. But on the flip side, I got a chance to meet that Rasheed Mathis guy that I was telling y'all about because he played for the Jaguars. And he literally took me under his wing. And he showed me how to be a professional football player, showed me how to be a real man because, man, I was a boy in a man's body in a lot of ways. But he showed me what it looks like to live rightly, right? And that is somebody that I can model my life after to be successful, both in football, successful in life, successful in my family. So having the right type of role model is very important. And then lastly, I guess to the adult, I would say, there's always somebody that needs to meet you, hear your voice, read your book, listen to your podcast, watch a video to gain the necessary motivation that they need to be successful in life. So don't be afraid to be transparent. Don't be afraid to be transparent because somebody needs to hear that. Somebody needs to hear that, hey, this is where I was at. This is what I struggled with. This is how I came out of it. You can do it too.
Wow.
That's real, man. I can't wait till we get this in actual podcast form, man. This will go blow up. But man, like it's always beautiful to see one of our just to go through the league and come out like an even better individual, continuously growing. Like I admire that so much, so much.
Absolutely. Well, we're just so grateful. And like we said, like I said earlier, continue being you. And we will, the Black podcast, like we were mentioning before, we have a company called HSBA. And we do mentorship and leadership programs. And it's for the same purpose of making sure that our young men whether they're in high school or college, have the necessary skills to transition into life for whatever their life is supposed to look like, whatever success looks like for them, and not give them that pressure of, you have to have this or you have to have that in order to be successful or to be acceptable or to be whatever. And so, we're very passionate about the education of our young men, and just making sure they have the skills that they need to become the man that they're supposed to be, desire to be. And so I just thank you for working in that space, and sharing your story with us. A lot of people tend to want to get away from that story, or whatever it is. But the more we tell our story, the more we heal, and the more other people heal. And like you said,
Yeah.
planting that seed into people's lives, and making sure that we're doing our part, as Christians, or as here on earth, that your life is not just for you but for other people. And sometimes when people say, he doesn't put more on you than you can bear, or this and that, but he puts exactly on you what you can handle. So your story is designed just for you, and someone else going through that may not make it out the same way, but it's through your story that they get to see, when I say glory, or it's through your story that they have hope. And so we just thank you, for just your vulnerability and your willingness to open up. And do you have anything coming up that we can support you in? We can let the guests know where they can find you, before we close out. So where they can find you, and if you have any upcoming events or products that we can buy from you.
Sure. So I can be reached by email. Is probably the best way. My email is doncarey3@gmail.com. DONCAREY, the number 3, at gmail.com. I responded. I respond to emails more so I do phone calls and texts. But so that's the best way. When COVID lifts, in the state of Virginia, the best way to support us with our foundation is go to the REECH Foundation. Now, REECH is an acronym, REECH Foundation.org. You can see the great work we're doing there. We don't really have anything coming up where the individuals can buy. I mean, the documentary we're working on, we're in post production, so pretty soon we'll be talking with different distributors, Netflix, Hulu, and all those guys. And once we land with the distributor, then I shoot you all a message, then you can kind of point people to that. But I think it's gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, it will. Everything that you're doing is going to be perfect. So, and that's just because your heart is in the right place. And so, anytime your heart is in the right place, things always work out for our good. So, I truly believe that. And so, thank you for, again, accepting the invite, your vulnerability, all your wisdom. We truly appreciate you. Your children are so blessed to have you. So is your wife. And so blessings to your family and you, and all your future endeavors. And just thank you again for being a part of the B.L.A.C.K podcast. And so we're going to put you in the backstage while we close out, and then that'll be it. So thank you again.
You have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Sir.
Amazing. We don't even have to say anything else about him. So I was just amazing to see his story, right? A lot of times we think about these athletes, they don't always have that story, as you mentioned, Brian, as going through sports. They always usually seem like they started off with a bad story, and sometimes they end with a bad story, and so just hearing his journey, and how everything started to transition into where he's at right now is a blessing to know that sports can do these things for you. Having the right people in your life, making the right choices, having people that are going to hold you accountable, whether it's a stepmom, stepdad, whoever it is coming into your life, and building this structure, and stability and dedication is so necessary for our young men. As he mentioned, his stepfather coming in right at the perfect time in his life, that just opened up where he is right now. So it was definitely a blessing to hear his story and all that he's accomplished.
Yeah, I agree. And it makes me look, I continue to look deeper at myself. Um, just I just draw connections. Just the fact that we played the same position. I was a safety when I wrapped up playing football, and I really know how that position in and of itself, like, it can play into other areas of your life as you grow. if you really look at it the right way. And then just having that desire to give back to the next generation. So I honestly I see some collaborations with what he's got going on. So
Absolutely,
we should do.
absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Definitely a blessing. So we want to thank everyone for continuing to support us here on the Black Podcast. You know, it's important that we're sharing the story. So again, it may not be the story that you think is for you, but his story is for everybody. I can tell you right now, there's something about his story that you can apply to your life, whether you're 6 years old, 16, or 60. Um, and whether you're a man or a woman, his story can really help you. And so just make sure you share these videos, share on your social media. We are here live on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So please make sure that you're sharing these videos. And you can find us here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. Now, sometimes we have to move our show to a Tuesday or move our time back to 5 o'clock. I think our next guest might be at 5. I think that's our next one or the week after. But just make sure you're always watching on our social media for the flyers. We always keep an update on what we have coming up next, who we have coming up next, and never look at it and think that you don't need that story or you don't need to log in for that. Because I can tell you right now, when we are choosing these guests, we're choosing them with a purpose. We're not just, you know, just throwing out guests on there. We are actually making sure that we are getting people of not I'm not gonna say of relevance, but just people that we know are an influence, whether they know it or not. Some of us don't think that we're a person of influence, but we all are. We all have something, some kind of story, something that we need to make sure that we, share with other people. So I'm just very blessed again to be a part of this journey with my partner Brian Streak here. And again, please check us out on We Are HSBA. That's where you will find out all our information about what we're doing in the Black community when it comes to education, our young men, our mentorship and leadership programs. So again, we want to thank you for your support. You will find us here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. But again, make sure that you're always watching. And we want to thank all of our guests that were live and asking questions and just interacting. We appreciate you. But now we need you to share the video and share the show because it's amazing. So again, thank you for the Black Podcast. I'm Dr. Sherelle Hobson and my partner,
Brian Street. We'll see you guys on the flip.